Hi everybody, it's Ajanette and I'm back to go through the different subcomponents of the three-stage memory model. And so I am just going to launch us. When we left off, we talked about the three-stage memory model and each of the three stages. And then I referenced the fact that each of these stages breaks down into subcomponents. So that's what we're going to focus on today. I want to start by talking about the different subcomponents of the sensory memory. And so we already kind of alluded to these when we talked about the fact that each of these subcomponents has a different duration of time that we can hold the information in our sensory memory. So for echoic memory, that's really auditory sounds, and you can remember that because sounds can kind of echo. And our auditory data can actually be held longer in our sensory memory than our visual or iconic. So you want to remember this. Icons are usually visually appealing to look at, like Frank Sinatra as an icon or something of that nature. And so again, we have about 2 to 4 seconds for echoic memory and only about a half a second for visual memory. So we have to do something with that information fairly quickly in order to process it to our short-term memory, and we must selectively attend to the information. If we do not engage in selective attention, then we're not going to carry that information or push that information and code it on into our short-term memory. So our short-term memory breaks down into 3 components: a central executive that functions more like a CEO type thing, and then our phonological loop, phono as in like phonetics, sound, and loop as in it kind of repeats or loops around in your mind. Visual spatial sketchpad, if you think of visual, it's like visual information, and spatial, think of like location, where things located. And so your book actually gives you a really good example of how to conceptualize these things. If any of you have worked in food service, you might be able to relate. But when you have somebody, a waiter, come and take your order, then it's like, how am I going to remember who ordered what? At some restaurants, they just come up to you and name off the food, and then you tell them who ordered it. But in some restaurants, the waitress or waiter actually specifically puts your meal down in front of you that you order directly. So there's 2 ways. First of all, your central executive kind of coordinates which one is going to be utilized, or how much it's going to be utilized, or when it's going to be utilized, or the sequence of which it's going to be utilized. And so it decides, am I going to rely on my phonological loop? Am I going to rely on my visual spatial sketchpad? Am I going to use some combination thereof? And then it decides when it's going to kind of push that information into your long-term memory. So somebody that's relying more heavily on a visual spatial sketchpad, they might mentally picture your food. Like if I ordered shrimp, then they might mentally picture shrimp in front of me. And then, let's say my son orders steak, they might mentally picture the steak in front of him. But they're usually using that visual sensory information, kind of that spatial, where things are located, to help process that information. The phonological loop is more of the auditory stuff. So they might actually rehearse in their mind. They might engage in that maintenance rehearsal. They might also, rehearse like, okay, wife, steak, wife, steak, wife, steak, husband, shrimp, or vice versa. But they're using that auditory, that phonological loop. Additionally, I'm going to move you down here. I want to kind of take you through some exercises. So have a pen with you and some paper before we get started and move to the next thing. And for now, I just want you to have the pen down, okay? And then I want you to watch the screen very carefully. Don't watch my image down here. Watch the screen up here, okay? And then pay attention to it, because you're only going to have a limited amount of time. I want you to remember the numbers on the screen. Don't write them down. Okay. So you had a short time to look and remember the numbers on the screen. Now some of you might cheat and go back right now, and I understand that, but do your best not to. Now write down as many numbers as you can possibly remember. Okay, so now how many did you get? How did you remember the numbers? That's a really important question. Inevitably, some of my students will say they just said 419563, 419563, and they were engaging in that maintenance rehearsal. So they were relying on what aspect of their short-term memory? Yeah, phonological loop, right? When they're just repeating that auditory information in their head again and again. Some will actually remember this as like chunks. So 419 is like a phone number. 563 is like the prefix, right? This is like the area code. This is like the prefix. This is like the body. So they really were expanding the capacity. Remember I said the capacity of your short-term memory is anywhere from 5 to 9 items. So 7 plus or minus 2. If you're trying to remember it one number at a time, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Well beyond our capacity. For those that were able to get 10 numbers accurately, they often engage in chunking, where they did it as 419, 563, 5905, as 3 separate chunks of data rather than 10 separate chunks of data. And when you chunk it like we do with phone numbers or our social security number, then it actually increases your capacity, and it's a nice memory strategy. This actually is in fact a phone number. It's a phone number to the AA book. So if you wanted to order your own copy, you should be able to call this number. So I thought, you know, if we're going to play this memory activity game, you might as well have a phone number that might be useful, because binge drinking is very common among college-age students. Not that it's recommended, but in case you decide you need help, here's a number. Additionally, how many of you had a really great accuracy for the numbers in the beginning or the numbers at the end, but then you forget the numbers in the middle? Yeah, that's pretty common. And we call that the serial position effect, where we have better memory for information based on the position that it's in. So serial refers to like seriation, putting things in a sequence or an order. And we have a primacy effect and recency effect, where the primacy is the stuff at the beginning. We usually remember that better. Or the recency is the stuff that's most recent or at the end, so we usually remember that better. And we forget the stuff in between quite often. And so I want you to just pause for a moment and ask yourself, how does that apply to what I'm learning in the classroom? How can that apply to me studying psychology? Remember that I'm breaking these videos up into chunks, okay? And I'm doing that, number one, you can take a break, you can stretch, you can go to the bathroom, but serial position effect says if I were to do one big giant long video, you're going to forget a lot of that middle content. So what I'd rather do is do a series of small short videos to enhance what you remember, because you're always going to remember the stuff at the very beginning of the video and the stuff at the end of the video first, and you're going to forget what's in the middle. So if I have fewer and fewer middle components, or what's in the middle is a smaller amount of information, then I'm trying to minimize the amount of information that you can retain. The same practice can be applied to your reading. As you're reading, take small breaks. Don't try to read the whole chapter at once. You will forget it. Unless you may even want to read going along with our videos. So read the portion that I am explaining in the video right after you watch the video. Maybe that can help you as well. So now let's talk about the two types of long-term memory. Long-term memory breaks down into explicit or declarative memory. We can declare the information that's in that memory. We have conscious awareness of it. It's very explicit, or it's out there, it's stated, it's known, okay? And that breaks down, but before I break that down, let me talk about implicit memory. Implicit is non-declarative. It's implied. It's kind of behind the scenes. I can't really state or declare how I know the information, or even that I'm consciously aware that I know the information, but I just do. And so that breaks down into three different types. Our explicit memory includes our semantic memory. When you're arguing about semantics, you're arguing about meanings. You can look up meanings in books or definitions in dictionaries. So our semantic memory is all the stuff that we learn, that we know, that it's written down somewhere. It's contained in some book somewhere. The day we were born is processed or registered on our birth certificate, who our parents are, our address, the capital of California, where the ruler of the free world. All of those facts and details can be found in books. So this is kind of the traditional knowledge. Episodic, if you think of episodic as in the episodes of your life, this is also called autobiographical memory. This is your own story. So this is kind of your own personal history. So who was the person that you kissed the very first time? Who was your first grade teacher? Remember your third birthday party, or remember the first time you went to Disneyland, or when you graduated from high school. All those kind of personal memories that reflect the episodes of our lives. I remember this. I remember when my child was born. I remember when I graduated from college. I remember when I got my first job. I remember all of these things. I remember when I met my husband. I remember all these things. And that's the episodes of our lives. Implicit and non-declarative also breaks down into 3 different types of memories. And so I'm just going to move me out of the way so I can cover those. But the procedural memory is the how-to, the procedures. So this is the how-to memory. It also relies a lot on your muscle memory because it could be movements. It could be, how do I tie my shoes? How do I button my shirt? We don't usually consciously think about how do I button a pair of pants or how do I zip up my zipper, but our bodies automatically do it for us. It's not something we're consciously aware of or consciously controlling, so it's part of our implicit long-term memory. And often you might forget facts and figures, but you can still very much know how to do certain things. So sometimes you can have memory impairments that might hurt your explicit memory, but your implicit memory is still intact. Like for Alzheimer's, for instance, maybe I forget someone's name, or I forget that, who they are in my life or my relationship with them, but I might remember how to play the piano, for instance. Okay, so classically conditioned memories are all the things that we talked about in Chapter 6, and those are related to remember that it only has to take one experience. It doesn't even have to be a series of experiences. We only have to choke on that taco once to develop that implicit fear, or that kind of unconscious fear of tacos. And so those classically conditioned memories are stuck in our implicit memory, our non-declarative memory. Sometimes we don't even know how we became afraid of snakes or how we became afraid of spiders, but we did nonetheless, and it's kind of behind the scenes there. And then finally, priming. If you think of primer, like you primer a wall before you paint it, or I just recently learned that there's a makeup primer. You put primer on your face before you put makeup on, and it helps your makeup stick. Priming is the process of kind of preparing your unconscious to experience things. So it's kind of prepping your memory. So Jewish individuals, because of their own personal history, they've been primed, and so, or I should say their cultural history. So when you show some images, and it includes the swastika, the German Nazi symbol, they automatically focus in on that. They might forget some of the other items, but they almost never overlook the presence of the swastika because they've been primed for it. Or when you're watching a scary movie and then all of a sudden the phone rings, you've been kind of primed to be fearful, scared. And so again, that's happening implicitly, and it's in our non-declarative memory. So I'm going to stop there, and then we're going to go over some other aspects of memory theory when we come back in the next video, and I will look forward to seeing you.